The Union Jack represents the reunion of the United Kingdom of the 12 tribes of Jacob, or Jacob. The Union Jack is red, white, and blue, the same colors as the 3 crowns of Egypt. Researchers of both Bible and Egyptian history have concluded that the Hebrews and the Egyptians shared the same royal bloodline. But why? Why the cover-up? Today, Thutmose III is immortalized in stone in the corporate city-state of London, right next to his Egyptian obelisk honoring the pagan Egyptian god Amun. Thutmose III organized military campaigns with his mighty armies and chariots and defeated the enemies of the Hiverew Hyksos who had settled in Canaan. At the heart of London city-state is a 187-ton, 69-foot-tall Egyptian obelisk called Cleopatra's Needle. It was transported from Egypt and erected on the banks of the River Thames. Cleopatra was the last in a succession of Hebrew Ptolemy kings. The queen crowned at her coronation ceremony on top of a symbolic Egyptian step pyramid. The royal scepter originates in ancient Egypt and was carried by the Egyptian god Amun and by Egyptian pharaohs who called themselves the Son of God. The royal scepter is now carried by pharaonic descendant Queen Elizabeth II. Her scepter contains the world's largest cut diamond, called the Star of Africa. The queen's punishing flail or whip is partially hidden under her arm. The flail or whip also originates with the pharaohs of ancient Egypt. The symbol of the bee can be found within the queen's royal wardrobe. In ancient Egypt, bees were the symbol of Egyptian royalty as well as the symbol of Egypt. The headdress worn by judges and the queen's high-ranking officials originate in ancient Egypt. Kilts, like the one worn by Prince Charles, originate with the Egyptian pharaohs who wore white kilts. Royal jubilees originate in ancient Egypt. Egyptian pharaohs celebrated their jubilees after 30 years of rule. In pharaonic tradition, the queen has celebrated both silver and golden jubilees. Incest was practiced by ancient Egyptian royalty. Mothers married sons and brothers married sisters to keep the power and the money all in the family. Like their pharaonic ancestors, the British monarchy have a long history of incestuous inbreeding. The corpses of deceased pharaohs were preserved and entombed beneath their pyramid temples. The corpses of 19 deceased British monarchs are also preserved in marble tomb slabs beneath the modern-day temple called Westminster Abbey. The ancient pharaohs advertised their power with their image on coins and stone monuments. The power of the queen worldwide is advertised with her image printed on more coins and stamps than any other head of state in history. The structure of government in ancient Egypt was a step pyramid model, with the Grand Vizier and priesthood one step below the pharaoh. Today's monarchy reigns using a much more sophisticated pyramid model of authority. About 3,500 years ago, the Semitic Hyksos kings ruled Egypt for 100 years, but were expelled from Egypt into Canaan. The Egyptians called these Hyksos people the Habirews, which means Hebrews. These expelled Hebrews invaded and conquered the land of Canaan and changed the name of the land from Canaan to Israel. After the Egyptian people forced the Hebrew Hyksos kings out of Egypt, the only way the Hebrews could continue ruling Egypt was to hide their Hebrew identity from the Egyptian people. They did that by changing their Hebrew names to Egyptian names and intermarrying with Egyptian royalty, just like the biblical Joseph did. By hiding their Hebrew identity, the Hebrews continued to rule Egypt secretly as Egyptian royalty. They worshipped Egyptian gods, followed Egyptian laws, and violated Jewish Hebrew laws. This meant they had to hide their Hebrew identity not just from the Egyptian people, but from the Hebrew people as well. They had to keep their royal Hebrew Egyptian identity and their worship of Ammon hidden within royal power circles and secret societies, just as they have done to this day. The world's biggest and best-kept secret is that the descendants of the Hebrew pharaohs of Egypt have ruled throughout history. Over the millennia, they have left oceans of blood in their wake. They have murdered, cheated, slaughtered, robbed, colonized, and enslaved to fulfill their biblical covenants for an eternal throne and one world empire. The symbols on the British coat of arms reveal Britain's Hebrew origin. According to the Bible, the harp symbolizes the Hebrew King David. The biblical lion and unicorn holding up the shield symbolize the nation of Israel. The motto, Dieu et mon droit, means God and my right, indicating the divine right of the British monarch to an eternal throne. The hymn, Zadok the Priest, written by Handel, was performed at the Queen's coronation in 1952. Zadok the Priest was the biblical priest who anointed the Hebrew King Solomon while the people cried, "God save King Solomon, long live King Solomon, may the king live forever." During the coronation ceremony, the Queen turns to face the four corners of the globe. The orb carried by the Queen represents the globe over which the monarch rules. The monarch's coronation gifts of a rod, bracelets, and a ring are a reenactment of the Bible story of the Hebrews, Judah, and Tamar. The Pope's headdress is strikingly similar to the headdress of the Egyptian god Ammon. His bent cross resembles the scepter of Ammon. Like the Egyptian pharaohs, British monarchs wear signet rings, which over the millennia have been passed down from their Hebrew ancestors. The British Mint recently printed legal tender coins called the One True Ring and the Ring of Power. On one side of the coin is Queen Elizabeth II. On the flip side is the ring from Lord of the Rings. These legal tender coins printed by the British Mint raise the disturbing question, who is the real Lord of the Rings?
One ring to rule them all.
The inscription on the ring reads, "One ring to rule them all, one ring to find them, one ring to bring them all, and in the darkness of their ignorance, bind them." The covenant that the biblical God gave to Abraham was a promise to make his name great and to make for him a great nation. Today, Great Britain is the only nation called great. In Hebrew, the word Britain literally means land of the covenant, and British means man of the covenant. the stone of Jacob, a Hebrew patriarch, beneath the queen's throne chair. The monarch's crown has 12 stones at the base, each representing the 12 Hebrew tribes. The 12 stones of the 12 tribes were also worn on the breastplate of Hebrew high priests in Canaan. One of the Semitic Hyksos leaders who became king of Egypt was Yacuber. Since Yacuber is the Aramean name for Jacob, Egyptology experts interpret this as factual evidence that the biblical Jacob and the Hyksos king Yacuber were one and the same. Historical records show that the Semitic Hyksos kings ruled Egypt for over 100 years. The Egyptian people rebelled against these Semitic kings and pushed them into northern Egypt. By 1500 BC, a peace agreement was reached between the Egyptians and the Semitic Hyksos, which allowed the Hyksos people to leave Egypt peaceably and move to Palestine and Jerusalem in the Egyptian-controlled land of Canaan. Their gradual and peaceful migration closely matches the Bible story of the Semitic Hebrew exodus from Egypt into Canaan in 1447 BC. According to the Bible story, when the Hebrews arrived in Canaan, they renamed it Israel and divided the land up into 12 tribal states, which they named after the sons of Jacob. Historically, a series of powerful invaders, the Philistines, Assyrians, Babylonians, and Persians, conquered the land of Canaan . After his famous Battle of Megiddo in Canaan in 1479 BC, Thutmoses installed district governors in garrison cities throughout Canaan. Did Thutmoses choose his district governors from the 12 Hebrew tribes named in the Bible? They fled to Greece with their gold and their riches. They wore white kilts like the Egyptian pharaohs, played goatskin bagpipes, adopted the Greek culture, and settled along the river Danube, which they named after the tribe of Dan. By 322 BC, their leader, Alexander the Great, reconquered Egypt and appointed his general Ptolemy I as the new Hebrew pharaoh of Egypt. After the Hebrews settled in the land of Canaan, their king, King David, reigned for 50 years. Egyptian history reveals that Pharaoh Susenes also ruled Canaan for nearly 50 years, at the same time as the biblical King David. Both battled the same enemy called the Sea People or Philistines. Both King David and Pharaoh Susenes had sons with almost identical names, Solomon and Simon. The name of biblical King David's son, Solomon, means son for Saul, and O-M-O-N is an alternative spelling of Ammon. The name of Pharaoh Susenes' son, Simon, means son of Ammon. Simon and Solomon reigned at exactly the same time and fought the same enemies in Canaan, called the Mitanni, the Hittites, and the Philistines. Pharaoh Simon's documented battle with the Philistines in Palestine and his capture of the Canaan city of Gezer clearly proves an ancient alliance between the Egyptians and the Hebrews.